That's one of the receiving sites. Yeah, it's been great.
Very impressive.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna get started here, and just a couple of weeks ago, a little QRM going here. A couple of weeks ago, we got an email from Rick, and he says, "Hey, I'm on my way to Dayton. I used to live in the area, and yeah, my name's Rick Zach." I'm like, "I know a Rick Zach," and so he was saying, he was passing by the area. So, well, hey, come on, let's get together. Maybe we can, stop, have a Speedy at Speedy Rib Pit, and then yesterday I come to find out that, well, actually he's coming by Saturday afternoon, I mean, Wednesday afternoon, like today, and I'm still my original speaker had sort of had to cancel on me. I said, well, hey, what you got in your back pocket for a talk? And so Rick is very active in many things, in specifically in ham radio. Has done a number of talks at some national conventions, and I thought, well, why don't you share your experience of ham radio in New Hampshire and some of the stuff that you've done there. So Rick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you.
It's been literally over 50 years.
We haven't seen each other in over 50 years.
Yes.
So ham radio is quite a hobby. Yeah, yes, I'll show you a picture of me with hair too.
Not to interrupt, but remember we were talking about the New York State CUSA party and the plaque and everything. Well, I know the guy who runs it, and I asked him, I said, "What's the story with the plaque and the certificate?" And he says he's getting ready for Dayton, leaving in the morning, but I can't stick around, but wanted to get back to you. Plaques are on order, so they should go out in June. We have to do some manual work on a file for certificate printing to identify the order of finish. I expect that to be also happening in June. So sometime in June, we should see that plaque. So, all right.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes, we're still recording.
Okay. Anyway, my family moved here in '58. Went to Homer Brink Elementary in Endwell. In fact, I went there a few years ago. The principal gave me a tour, and I said, "Well, who was Homer Brink?" And he says, "Nobody knows," including the principal. Oh, good. I'd like to find out. But anyway, Rick Dupree and I at N2K were friends in junior high school, and we used to send notes back and forth in CW, just written on a piece of paper, so the teacher couldn't figure out what we were doing. Anyway, my father got transferred out of IBM to White Plains, and that was the kind of the end of my ham experience here, living here. And I had a great childhood here. The IBM Country Club was in full operation, and the whole family could go there to see movies, and K2ERQ had the radio club up on the hill. I remember as a kid going up there, they had a 6-meter net, and the guy had this pan adapter, World War II surplus pan adapter, and he could actually look at the 6-meter band and see where the stations were. I said, wow, that's amazing. Now every radio made kind of has one now, but back in the 60s, that was a big deal, made a big impression. So anyway, IBM Explorer Post 204 had K Desker, K2ZRO, Drew's dad, and thanks to that operation and his dad, we got our licenses, and pretty much all of us are still in touch with each other, which is rather amazing. Dennis Dunbar became chief engineer, WSKG. I don't know if you know him at all. He recently passed away, unfortunately. I'm sorry?
Heather Dunbar.
No, Dennis Dunbar.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he moved out of the area many, many years ago, so he has no family here. Anyway, and we all went into various careers thanks to Kay. I kind of went into broadcasting, went to BCC for a while, didn't like it. Went to a college in Boston, got a degree in both engineering and TV production. And through my contacts with Dennis, and also with WBNG, there was a guy named John Bartholomew Tucker. You might not remember. Okay. So I contacted him, and he was working at ABC, and says, "Hey, can you give us a tour of the place?" And he says, "Yeah, sure, come on down." So we went down there. So again, the linkage with ham radio and whatnot is still pretty consistent. So we got the tour at ABC, and we said, "Thanks." We saw the whole thing, and then a buddy of mine in college, we left the place. He says, "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" I says, "Yeah, we know the floor plan, and the security guard saw us only a few minutes ago. What if we just sneak in and see what we can, get a second helping?" So we did. We snuck past the security guard, acted like we belonged there. He didn't question us. And that was, I think, St. Patrick's Day, 1972. And we snuck down into the videotape rooms because we figured out where they were. And we were just hanging around watching these guys edit shows and play back to air. And says, "How do how do you guys get trained for this?" And he says, "Oh, ABC has a 2-week school, so you can learn how to do things ABC's way. And do you have any openings?" "Oh, yeah, we have a lot of openings," because 72 was the Munich Olympics. It was the Democratic and Republican Convention. So all the guys with the most experience were sent out to the hinterlands. And it was just a bunch of kids left to run the network. So they were dumb enough to hire us. And that was my first paying job in the industry. WSKG was volunteer work, but ABC was paid. And then after college, I went out to live in LA. And because I had my union card and experience and training for ABC, I was hired almost immediately by NBC in Burbank. And I got to work on Carson and, all kinds of fun stuff. But still that linkage from ham radio, just they told two friends and they told two friends. So without that linkage, it wouldn't have happened. So at least the way it did. So it's quite an amazing hobby. And even 50 years later, Drew and I still remember each other. So, and his dad was kind of the start of it all. My dad was a ham too, but he wasn't really into being a teacher, Elmer VE type person. He was more of an operator. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is two little looks at life. One of them is just comparing how ham radio clubs work in New Hampshire. And this was not a presentation. I'm driving here. I think, what the hell am I going to talk about? But on some websites, I can kind of get going with it. The ham radio scene in New Hampshire is actually pretty good. It's a small state, but the southern part of the state is pretty high tech. Kind of really a suburb of Boston, and central New Hampshire I live is sort of a vacation area. In fact, that's the view from my repeater site. That's Mount Washington in the background. And it's a vacation area, and a lot of wealthy people have homes there. Mitt Romney has a place. Jimmy Fallon has a place there. The Marriott family has a huge estate. So there's a lot of wealthy people, and plus there's a lot of normal people too. So, but I'll get to some of the contributions some of these people have made anyway. So probably the biggest club in New Hampshire is the Nashua Area Radio Society, and that's what Fred Kemmer, AB10C, ran. He's now the New England Division Director, so he can't be president of a club. But he has a great program for training online, ham radio boot camps. And the club was in distress, and he took them from about 30 members to over 400. So I'll get to his club in just a minute. I'm sorry?
No pressure.
I'm sorry?
You said area, like air? Area, the radio?
The area, like.
New Hampshire area.
Area.
Oh, well, his club is the Nashua Area Radio Society. He didn't want to put amateur radio in, and because of the way the New Hampshire laws are set up, you can't be a club and be a 501c3, so they had to call it a society. If anybody cares, but
Live free or die.
that is true.
Yeah.
So there's really, this is a website I created. I'm very much into trying to Elmer new hams. This is a work in progress. I only started it this March. But there seems to be a gap because Nashua does a terrific job training people online. I got my extra through Nashua. And there's a linkage between when Nashua drops off, okay, you got your license, now what are you going to do? And that's when a lot of theoretical hams just drop out of the hobby. So what this is meant to do is any local hams from our area can go to this website and say, what are the resources we have to actually get on the air? How do I know what equipment to buy? Hey, can you help me put up an antenna? So this site is designed to kind of fix that glue in the middle and get them attached to the right clubs. So as far as local clubs, let's see.
Back to you with your first name.
Yeah. I mean, I helped this woman. She just got her tech, and she wanted to get on 10 meters. So we went in her backyard and put up an infant halfway with her husband. It was fun. So this is the, I'm just going to show you.
I'm just gonna make this a little bigger so they can see it.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is the Lakes Region Repeater Association on the north side of Lake Winnipesaukee. Winnipesaukee is kind of this geographic barrier that separates the communities. But fortunately, most people in the area who are hams join both clubs because they both do things differently and whatever. Lakes Region has a network of repeaters. I think they have 4, and they're all linked. This is their Boy Scout Radio Merit Badge session we had just, I think, in March. And 2 people want to get their licenses out of that course. So that was successful. And they have just an unbelievable field day. I was mentioning some of the wealthy people who live there. Well, one of the guys, he doesn't throw it around. He just kind of stuff shows up somehow for the club. So we're going to do a field day. And he's bringing 3 triplexers, 3 antennas, and I think a dozen bandpass filters. So we're going to take all the antennas and widely separate them, bring them into where a Class A RV and a communications trailer are going to be. So all the radios and socializing and eating will be in a central area, but the antennas will be widely dispersed. And all the radios will share these 3 antennas. It's a pretty impressive system. So as Dave, K1DLM, is contributing most of that. I have a communications trailer. It's really a snowmobile trailer that I use for ATVs or snowmobiling and field day. So I just take out the snowmobiles, put in tables, and screw stuff into the walls, and suddenly it's a communications trailer. This club is the Central New Hampshire Amateur Radio Club, and both the Lakes Region and Central New Hampshire Club have about 90 members. And ironically, we have like 5,500 in the treasury, which is pretty close to you. So the stats of the clubs are very similar. Yeah. They have, I used to work at Gunstock Mountain Resort as an IT person, and this is their 2 440 and 6 meter repeaters at the summit in the ski patrol building. And I'm going to get back to this club in a minute. As of last night, yeah, about 24 hours ago, I was just made president of the club. So, but that's going to be a different thing I'll slightly touch on. I think they have one good thing. Let me see if I can find it. They talk about how the repeaters are linked, which is I'm going to get to in a minute. Okay. These are the repeaters. They're all linked by microwave and IP. Yeah, get that bigger again. What buttons do you press? Control and roll?
Control, then scroll.
Okay, good. So Gunstock Mountain here is kind of the nexus of the whole thing, and they use Ubiquity microwave systems to tie them together. The problem is the Ubiquity is quite noisy, throws off a lot of RF. That is a problem. So we have one site, we call them Franklin. You can just read for yourself what's on it. Moltenboro, which is a tough site to get at, to the fire tower. This one's at a small ski resort. This is at Gunstock Mountain Resort, which is the dominant mountain in the area. And then Samberton Steel Hill is just Fusion. Now this all looks great, except that the guy who, I'm trying to be diplomatic at this, the guy had, yeah, could you? Well, whatever.
No, it's an unlisted video.
Good, thank you. So the guy who put it all together, they had a very weak president. and kind of let anything go. So this guy started building all these repeaters. We're not totally sure where the money came from all the repeaters. And and then it became so complicated, he wouldn't let anybody help install, maintain, or even touch the repeaters. It became a very private, and it really pissed off a lot of members. They felt alienated. So the club, the dues paying members stayed high, but the participation went way, way down to the point where they couldn't get anybody to meetings anymore because the membership was so alienated. It was really sad. In fact, they had to go to quarterly meetings because they just couldn't get any members to show up. But I don't think they realized the damage that was done by not sharing and working as a club and not someone's subsidized project. And I don't think you have that problem here at all. You can tell by the attendance. But a bunch of us decided to run for president, and as of last night, officially, they're all gone. It was a very resounding clean sweep on the part of the voting. They used something called Election Buddy, which is an online thing, so you can't mess with it. And it actually got a little messier than that. But that's the Aries net I'm supposed to be on tonight. I won't be there, but it was kind of a real referendum from the members to say, no, we got to take back control of what's going on here. So what we found out last night is the new incoming treasurer has to get an asset list of, what assets does the club have? Where are they? What are they worth? How do you get access to them? So she's going to meet with the outgoing secretary on Friday to get that list. But there was oh, by the way, from one person, there's really actually two people. We actually own a lot of these repeaters. The club doesn't, so we're going to be taking them back. So we're losing some repeaters, some duplexers. We don't know what equipment is not owned by the club yet. So it's just, this is a good example of when you don't have strong open leadership, there's a lot of damage done. So what I'm trying to do is do a lot of healing, get the members to come back and say, hey, things have really changed. And it was, we didn't get elected by a little, we got elected by a landslide. So, but anyway, let me see.
This is up there. We can access it with All-Star and Echolink.
Yes, but he hasn't told anybody how to do it. He hasn't done any seminars for the members. Okay, this has All-Star and Echolink. How do you get into it? He's not telling anybody.
Do it on my iPhone.
I'm sure you can. He just doesn't. It's and then he has some D-Star repeaters, and it's just two people on him for the whole network.
Your fusion repeater, do you have that into a room, or is it just a standalone repeater?
No, it's connected through the which is HS100. I forget the name of it, but no, there's a thing called the Wolf Den. There's really three big fusion networks in New England. One of them is called the Wolf Den. It's run by some guy who dresses up like a wolf, which is a whole nother story. That's what he wants to do, and his calls W0LFE or something like that. But have you heard of him? Oh, anyway. Then there's a really good fusion network in Maine, and there's another one in southern New Hampshire. So fusion is really pretty active, and I'll get into that's the second part of the presentation. So I'm kind of a DMR guy at heart, but I've been won over by fusion. So any other questions about this?
He found it.
Good. Okay. So what stuff he's going to take away, including All-Star and Echolink, IRLP, we don't know. Another club, which was actually a spinoff from the Central New Hampshire Club, is the 603 Amateur Radio Club, which is our zip code. And because Central New Hampshire wasn't doing field day anymore, I'm sorry? Yeah, 603 is the area code, so you could be the 607 radio club, you know. So these guys, they tried to get CNARC to do a field day, and they just couldn't muster the members' interest, so they formed their own club. And all they do is winter field day and summer field day. That's it. There's no dues. There's no officers. They do have a repeater. One of the members owns a commercial radio tower. Another member contributed a repeater, and that has most of the community who used to be on the Gunstock repeater have since migrated to this. So they do. Well, here's their KK1RZ page. Okay. So yeah, this is their logo is the skull and crossbones because they want to be known as the rebels that broke away from the other club. Yeah, so no dues, no worries, no BS, no drama, just radio. That's truly how they work. This is some of their winter stuff. Oh, okay, this is the inside of my trailer. Son of a gun. And that's the outside of it. I put the club logo on the trailer. And the club flag is hanging off a end-fed half wave. This was another site that was very remote. This club really, really wants to be way off the beaten trail. So, and then 1 year, oh yeah, he says, this is the guy's real tongue-in-cheek. I was Clayton Enwin VAU, I was talking to him today driving down here. He says they opened the door to let the mice out. Let's see.
Was it all three with solar panels?
Oh yeah, one of his radios broke. I wonder if he had a, no, he didn't. Okay, because we used the ski patrol shack on the top of Gunstock 1 year for field day. That was excellent. Had a lot of fun with that. Whoops, come on. Another club is the New England Digital Emergency Communications Network, which is a linkage of 90 repeaters through all 6 New England states, including the Canadian Maritimes and Long Island and some of the stuff in the Hudson River Valley. I'm the trustee and owner of, well, donor of the repeater, I should say. This is on another shack that's on the summit of Gunstock.
What's the SWR at this point?
We just melted off.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not too bad. You'd be surprised. That's the 2-meter antenna. It's about 1 dB gain. And this is the same type antenna we have on the top of Mount Washington. So it's really a super rugged antenna. And the UHF antenna, which I'm the trustee of, is that one there. They're all low gain. We want the vertical beamwidth to be like this to get down into the valleys because we have so much overlapping repeater coverage we don't need or want to go far away. So, and let's go to NADECN. Well, these are all the repeaters. These are the UHFs and these are the VHFs. And these are full-time linked, 24 hours a day. And they're part of the Motorola DE MARC system. And they use a central controller. I forget the name of it. I'll think of it in a minute. But and it's pretty well up to date. For instance, this one in Selden, New York lost the internet, so they're not linked. But I can click on, let's go to Gunstock. Okay, so this is the view from the repeater site. I'm the trustee of it. Another winter, another ice storm. We tried putting up a remote 6-meter rig with a Flex 6300, and this was just 2 ham sticks side to side. But it turns out that these microwave dishes were causing so much interference, it was just totally unusable. It's not broadband all over the place. You never know where it's going to go, but you look right at the 10-meter band and boom, on a spectrum analyzer, you can see the crud, and then boom, it comes down again. And these are Gunstock's microwave systems. I know because I put them in. And there's no way Gunstock's going to take it down for the hand. So we just took down up this system. It wasn't viable. I'll get into these. I might come back to this later, talking about time slots and and talk groups on DMR. Is anybody here familiar at all with DMR? Okay, a few. Are there any DMR repeaters in Broome County?
There's just a Raspberry Pi
Yeah.
hotspot here.
Okay.
It is on DMR.
Okay,
I think the closest repeater is like 50+ miles away.
okay. Yeah, it'd be kind of iffy probably.
Fusion area.
We got fusion in here.
Yeah, and which is not surprising. Gunstock provided the tower crews to get up there and set up the microwave and antennas for us. We had a real good relationship with them. So,
We do have a Southern Tier DMR group that meets, and on that, on the Southern Tier talk group.
oh, really? What now? Do you know if they're on Brandmeister or?
Yes, Brandmeister.
okay.
31,367.
Okay, I'll get into that in the other part of the presentation.
Every week for the last year, and there help people get started on DMR.
Yeah, you need local Elmers. It's with a Yaesu fusion, you plug it in, put in your call letters, and anybody's on the air. With DMR, it's difficult. So then there's Fred Kemmer's group, the Nashua Area Radio Society. I'm a member of all these clubs. And that's where Drew did some work with, was it ARRL and other things?
Yeah, ARRL, yeah.
Yeah. And they had a boot camp that I attended about a month ago. It's how do you get the most out of your HF radio? And I've been a ham for 50 years and I still learned a lot about it. This is the Nashua Club here. I don't know if Fred's in any of these pictures. Nope. Very active club. This is the one with like 400 members. And QST did a good article about their boot camp. But this is what I used to finally, after 50 years being licensed, I took their online courses and I got my extra finally. So, and it's all online, so you don't have to be from New Hampshire. They'll welcome anybody to the course.
I was just going to ask about the exchange programs they have usually in colleges, so maybe they could have something like that in the ham radio.
An exchange program? Meaning?
People can come visit, stay for some time, get to know the club, and they can come back and invite them also.
Oh, sure. Well, the courses are 100% online anyway. You're talking about the courses. Anybody, anywhere can sign up for them, and they're superb. They really are. And then Ham Nation did a blurb on them, and they're big into STEM. They did the balloons also, went up about to 110,000 feet, blew up, and it drifted down to Rhode Island. And APRS was squawking where it was for the whole route, so they picked it up in some pond someplace.
Yes. Been there, done it.
Yeah. And here's I won't play the video, you can look at it for yourself, but yeah, there's Fred. So that's Fred Kemmerer, AB10C, and that's his wife, Anita Kemmerer, I forgot her call. And that's, this is Dave, K1DLM. He moved from the Nashua area to the Lakes region, and he's the guy who's donating this incredibly expensive network of bandpass filters and triplexers and real asset to the club. So anyway, and this was Fred making a ISS contact. So those are and there's other clubs, of course, but I think that the real interesting thing is how the dynamics of the clubs, the demographics are usually very similar. And one thing we're trying to figure out is if we bring in new members, should we look at Boy Scouts, high schools? When I was a kid, junior high school and Explorers was a really good option. But nowadays, kids have so many other distractions. They might get their license and then they'll go to college and then they'll get a family, and then they get a job. And we found that where our marketing is going to be directed at is empty nesters, because their lives are a little more stable, 45 and over. They can predict what their future is going to be to a certain extent. And if you look around the room, we are at least empty nesters.
They have an extra room,
Right. Well, having a girlfriend who's a extra helps in my case. So, let's see. This was a presentation Now, keep in mind, I haven't seen this in years, so I hope that I'm gonna remember it. Where's the? Okay,
Okay, so I'm gonna grab this for a second so I can actually share that screen.
oh, okay.
Yeah. If I go like that. Slideshow. All right, there you go.
Okay, great. Now, given our demographic of who we are age-wise, you can see that I wisely made the font pretty darn big.
Thank you.
So this was a presentation I gave 7 years ago at what's now the New England Division ARRL Convention. It's in Marlborough, Mass. At the time, this was in Boxborough, Mass, but it's the same group doing it. And there's 5 digital modes and voice modes for VHF. And so this was an attempt at getting people oriented to what's out there. Now, the technologies really haven't changed much since I did the presentation, but the market acceptance and who's using what is changed pretty significantly. Whoops, see that? Okay, I got to edit. That's my old call letters. We were going to have 5 subject matters experts, 1 in each technology. They would have a lightning round so people can ask questions of the group. Then we transitioned into 5 breakout sessions, and they gave us a 2-hour window, which for an ARRL convention is almost unheard of. So we'll talk about APCO 25 or P25, D-Star, DMR, NXDN, and Fusion. So, what I can't quite read what this is. Let's see, what is it kind of like? Is it kind of move this?
Oh, yeah.
Ah, good. Okay. What operational feature changes have we seen in FM repeaters since 1956? That's mainly commercial repeaters. Can I still see it?
No, they can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a Motorola U43 or U44. It's a tube type radio with a real fancy solid state power supply in it. This was like in 1956. So what features change did we see? No, this replaced the vibrators. But mechanical vibrators. So what's changed? Not much. This is a GE Progress line. I had one of these as a kid. Nice radio. I wish I had one. So do the new repeaters, FM repeaters, talking FM at this point, do they have improved audio? Not a bit. You could take a repeater built in 56 or a repeater in 85 and they're going to sound the same. That was a GE Progress line, by the way. Any improved range? No, not really. I mean, maybe an FET preamp might help, but not really. So if everyone uses FM right now, why go to a digital mode if the only difference is the modulation type? If there are no feature differences, don't do it. Why change? You're just using a different modulation scheme. It doesn't make much sense. So what features are different in the digital world? Well, static-free audio. You don't get motor boating or static. It just, the audio, the signal strength goes down, the bit error rate comes up, and then boom, it's simply gone. Just sort of like your HDTV, same thing.
Audio. There you go.
Oops, they couldn't hear me. Okay. So static-free audio is one. Some modes support both voice and data, text messaging, emails, binary file transfers. Can't do that on FM. Some modes support 2 conversations on 1 RF channel. That's DMR. And most modes support wide area IP-based networking, but when this presentation was done in 2016, wow, it was 9 years ago, right? No, 8 years ago. Some were very difficult, if not impossible, and some were pretty easy to do on IP-based networking. It's even more important in rural areas, like up in Maine, the DMR networks are very popular because the people are really spread out. And you don't have a local group, or you don't have a local ham club to socialize with. So setting up these linked repeaters is kind of their lifeline back to humanity. And it's also very valuable for emergency communications. And then the question is, which mode should I choose? This is not Betamax versus VHF. Everything can win. The biggest question is, where do your friends hang out? You know, if you're into D-Star trying it out, but everybody else is on Fusion, like, well, you can do it, but you don't have anybody to talk to. And then what's available in your area? Is it in your XYL approved budget? One thing that it's one of the club members, but I'll call him back. Probably the biggest thing that doesn't show up on here is you need an Elmer or a club on some of these modes. If you're using Fusion, it's pretty easy. If it's D-Star, you need a little bit of help. If you're trying to get on DMR, it takes a lot of help. So if you don't have a local club and local Elmers to help you through, DMR is going to be very frustrating for you. Okay, let's take a look at all 5 modes. P25 was the first. It was originally designed for public safety communication systems. It's actually called P25 Phase 1. Phase 2 is also out. It's the oldest vocoder made, the analog to digital converter, made by DVSI Systems of Maynard, Mass. In fact, all the codecs you see here are going to be made by the same company. Most users nationwide are TDMA. The Broome County Sheriff's Department, are they analog or?
They went DMR and they went,
Phase 2?
phase 2.
Okay, good.
Phase 2.
Okay,
It's all public safety agencies in Broome County. Everybody's.
excellent. It's a smart move. Phase 1 and Phase 2 aren't remotely like each other. Phase 2 is more like DMR because they have multiple time slots, and they used a much newer vocoder from DVSI Systems. So the audio quality is a lot better than P25 Phase 1. I'm really delighted to hear they went Phase 2 because that's the way to go. So I also used to be in the two-way radio business.
UHF to cover Broome County.
How many sites?
16 sites.
Yeah, with the hills, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's, UHF, but they got 95 or 98% coverage.
Wow.
On the 5-watt HT.
Now, who was the vendor who put it in
Motorola.
for mobiles and the base stations?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually a consortium that goes from Pennsylvania all the way up to the Canadian border in this central corridor.
That's
So
actually, they
all
did
the
it right.
counties are going that way in this corridor.
That's smart. I'm glad to hear it. P25 Phase 1 has just one voice path per channel. Multi-site linking was difficult, but possible if you have a lot of time and money. That's not the case now with Phase 2. Second was D-Star, that everybody's probably heard of. It was designed from day one to service hams, very established nationally. It's an open standard from JARRL, not the Japan Amateur Radio League. It's not proprietary to ICOM. In fact, Kenwood, I think, came out with some as well. It's a slightly newer vocoder than the P25 Phase 1, but it's noted that when the signal gets kind of weak, it has an R2D2 sound to it. And people call it R2D2. Okay, you're fading out, you're turning into R2D2. It's just the nature of the vocoder. You can do multi-site linking with D-Star. This was, again, 8 years ago. And that was just coming out. Now, one thing that was very frustrating, I was involved with putting up 2 D-Star repeaters, one on Mount Uncanunic up in New Hampshire near Manchester, and one was on top of the Prudential Tower in Boston. And these are primo sites. The problem is ICOM just took two ordinary mobile units, put them in a box. No, there's no narrowband filtering on it. It's just the receiver is open to the whole band. And both sites failed miserably because the receiver RFI. They could transmit, but nobody could get into it. So on a repeater, what's the use? So what one club did is they very brilliantly, was the Minuteman Repeater Association. They took the receiver guts from a GE Master 2, which is a really good receiver, very narrow, and they hooked it up to the ICOM digital guts, the signal processing system, and it worked.
What's guts?
I'm sorry?
What is guts?
The inners of it.
They
Like your
opened up
guts?
The board and found out what makes it tick and tweak what wasn't working to make it work.
Yeah. So, and then they, ironically, what they ended up doing was have you heard of the Clay Observatory in Brighton, Mass?
Okay.
So what they did, they put a remote receiver at the Clay Observatory because it was still a lot of RF. They put the transmitter up at the Prue on VHF, had another VHF receiver at the Clay Center about 10 miles away, which is an observatory just like this place. And then they linked it up with a high power UHF transmitter to blast through all the RFI, and it worked. So, but that's a lot of work to go through because the manufacturer designed a lousy receiver. Oh, okay. That's my butt on the left. This is up on the Prudential Tower, putting up this antenna. This antenna has since gone. In fact, the other antenna is on my house now. But it was we improved it step by step, but I think the return on investment in terms of time, labor, creativity just didn't pay off. Now, the third digital mode was digital mobile radio, or DMR. So again, this was designed from day one to be aimed at businesses, not necessarily public safety, only because it came out later, and the federal funding would only permit P25 grants. So DMR was not included. It's an open standard from ETSI, which is the European technology standardization thing, I guess. It's a world standard. It's a much newer vocoder than P25 or D-Star, but again, that same company in Maynard, Massachusetts, DVSI, is providing the codec. And it costs about $25 a piece for the chip, for the vocoder or the radio, which is not too bad, except you have to order like 10,000 in a whack. So that's tough. TDMA is time division multiple access. So there's 2 voice paths per channel. And the 2 voice paths flip back and forth at 30 milliseconds. So you can have one conversation on time slot 1, a completely separate conversation on time slot 2, and they don't even have any awareness that the other guy's talking. So you put up one repeater, you get 2 channels. And the hams have taken real good advantage of that. I'll get to that pretty soon. Multi-site IP-based linking is now very common. I think it's probably used almost exclusively now. I don't think anybody's putting up standalone DMR repeaters. There's not that much to gain by it. There's 2 major repeater manufacturers, Motorola and Hytera. When I did this, Hytera has since been sued by Motorola, and they sued them into the Stone Age. They had to file for bankruptcy because Hytera, a Chinese company, was stealing Motorola's intellectual property. So like I said, I've got to do some updates to this. However, that's for the base station equipment or the repeaters, but in terms of radio manufacturers, there's a ton. Typically, they operate as a network of networks, at least in New England. NED-ECN is the big one with 90 members. eWarn's not around anymore. That was another similar network, but they've kind of been assimilated into the first group sites. Connecticut Aries is part of it. And because some of the key people in Connecticut Aries were affiliated with the Connecticut State Police, Connecticut State Police has provided tower sites all over the state for their DMR network. It's pretty impressive. I'll get to time slots in a minute. So there's 2 time slots and multiple talk groups per time slot, and that can be kind of confusing. Repeaters can be dual mode FM and digital, but if you choose to do dual mode, you lose networking. So I don't know of any DMR repeaters that are dual mode. They're almost all exclusively DMR. There's 2 IP-based incompatible linking protocols on the repeater side. IPSC is a proprietary protocol from Motorola, and DMR Plus from Hytera, which is not around anymore. The magic that glues all this together, a company called Rayfield Communications makes something called a C-bridge. And they usually, in fact, they're almost always located in commercial data centers. And in the case of the New England area, there's a bunch of C-bridges in Maine, one in the Boston area, and one in Connecticut. And I think Vermont has their own separate one now too. And all the repeaters in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire all go to this data center in Boston. In fact, have you ever heard of Live ATC? It's where you can listen to air traffic all over the world. Well, the guy who owns Live ATC is just drawing a blank. Dave, I forgot his name, but anyway, the guy who owns and created Live ATC is the guy who gets us into these data centers, because we're using the same racks that Live ATC is using to collect all their air traffic.
Does piping all this through some data center introduce any noticeable latency?
No, that's the amazing part. No. I mean, you got late. I think the vocoder may have more latency than the traffic, but no. It's a good question. So then you get these C bridges that have their own communities around them, and then each C bridge has a peer-to-peer. So you can be in northern Maine, and you can be in Connecticut and talk to each other. In fact, every Monday at, I think it's 7 or 8, I think it's 8, all 90 repeaters are linked up on the New England wide talk group, and you get guys from Canada, Long Island, New York, New Hampshire. They're all on one big system, and they'll have like 60 check-ins, on this net. Pretty impressive. It does work. See what else. The nice part is the linking policies are up to the bridge owners, but the repeaters can select which bridge to peer with. So what they're trying to do is NED-ECN, which is part of the DMR MARC network, is a pure play Motorola, and you have to use Motorola repeaters because that's what the C-bridge is talking about. Now, you might have different groups. Maybe you're on Cape Cod and you never want to talk to Maine, so you never have to, activate that group to talk to Maine. Maybe you want to activate it. So what they do is on time slot 1, remember these 2 time slots are flipping back and forth. Time slot 1 is used for out of area communications. So if you're on Cape Cod and you don't want to talk to somebody in Maine, you have a couple options. You could get on the New England wide talk group, which is on time slot 1, and you just key up the repeater. And that repeater will say, okay, somebody wants me to talk New England wide, and then your buddy in northern Maine gets on New England wide, and suddenly you're talking to each other. But you have to do a push to talk, otherwise that repeater is going to be running 24 hours a day, which is kind of crazy. A better example is the guy in Cape Cod would get onto the main talk group, and he'd key the mic to talk to Maine. The guy in Maine says, "Oh, that's Charlie down the Cape." He keys up, and they're talking back and forth. So it's just 2 people talking to each other, as opposed to the whole network. But it takes a lot of coordination, and the buyers or the owners buy in to get this right to make it uniform. Let's see. And there's 2 competing networks. One is Brandmeister, which is more freeform. It's kind of the Wild West. It's really open to experimentation. You can link FM repeaters to D-Star repeaters to DMR repeaters, and they don't care. We want it to be, wide open, which that's ham radio. I think it's a good idea. NED-ECN is the other one, which is highly formatted and structured. But the beauty is you can go anywhere in New England, as long as you know what repeaters are available, you know what the band plan is in terms of talk groups and time slots and all that. So it's uniformity versus freeform. I would say NED ECN, the highly structured one, probably has at least an 80% market share in New England. It used to be almost exclusive, but now Brandmeister has made some gains, which good for them. So it's not a monopoly the way it used to be. Still, it's heavily lopsided towards the more structured system. The fourth was NXDN, which is a combination of digital formats from both Kenwood and ICOM, and it was standardized by I think it's the American Railroad Association or whatever, but the railroads had to go narrowband, so they voted to go NXDN, and it really ticked off Motorola because they were cut out of that game. So any of the Class A railroads, I understand, are now on NXDN. They can use analog narrowband if they want, but there are some unique features that NXDN had that the other commercial modes didn't have. So, and there was a bunch of NXDN repeaters in southeastern Mass near Cape Cod, because those guys happened to work for the commuter rail and for Amtrak, so they were kind of into it. That's kind of fallen by the wayside, so I'm not sure if there's any NXDN activity on ham radio, at least in New England, anymore. Like I said, and then there's System Fusion. When I did this, I was trying to get some experts to talk about Fusion, and I couldn't because there weren't any. There weren't any repeaters. Yaesu was literally giving away the repeaters for $500 a piece. Was it DR1? I think it was. And the clubs were taking these and just putting them on analog only and say, screw the digital stuff, we don't need it. That was not a smart move on the Yaesu's part. So they came out with the DR2X, I believe, is the most current one, I think. Yeah. And now they require the club. No, if you're going to use it, it has to be at least dual mode. You can't do analog only. And what's happened is because Fusion now, in 2016, Fusion was just a glimmer in somebody's eye. It was also kind of a snicker because very few people were adopting it because it was unique to Yaesu. The equipment was expensive. Well, guess what? They gave away enough repeaters and enough people who drank the Kool-Aid where Fusion is now pretty hot item. Really easy to program. I have I'm a DMR guy, but I have a Fusion radio in my car. It's a unique modulation scheme for hams anyway. Yaesu, it's single source vendor Yaesu. You can run them in FM and digital. Pure digital mode has been a challenge to gain traction in New England, at least so far. Again, that was in 2016. That's changed dramatically. It is a much newer vocoder than P25 and D-Star. In fact, it uses the same vocoder as the DMR radios. You can do IP-based linking with the next generation of repeaters, which didn't exist when I did this presentation. Now it's pretty common. Excellent promotional subsidies from Yaesu. So what I thought was what started out as kind of a snickering joke is now the Goliath. It supports an additional high bandwidth mode that uses up a little more bandwidth, but the audio is pretty good. It's not that much better than narrowband FM, in my opinion. It's better, not narrowband FM, narrowband C4 FM. It's not, but it's also not narrowband. Plus, you can send blobs, binary large objects, like pictures of a tornado, whatever. So it will support sending pictures. And this is an old slide because the DR1X isn't available. The 2X is out. FTM 400 is no longer made. FTM 100 no longer made. FTM 3200 no longer made. But when HRO had a Black Friday sale right after Thanksgiving or before, whatever, I jumped at it. So the bad problem about Fusion, it's by far the most expensive. DMR by far is the least expensive to buy into for an end user. And Fusion is the most expensive because it's single source vendor. But I thought it was worth the investment. There's Tetra, which is mainly used by bus systems, hasn't had any traction. There's PDMR, which is a personal version of DMR used in China, no traction here. You can get dongles or hotspots. And there was going to be what's called a DV4 mobile, would have all 5 formats in it. That died. I saw the plastic model of it in Dayton. It looked impressive. Vocoders are separate and distinct from the modulation schemes. I don't want to get too nutsy boltsy with this. RF modulation schemes come after the vocoders, and they are unique to each technology. For instance, DMR and C4FM Fusion use the same vocoder chip, but they have different modulation schemes. So apples and oranges. And that's the guys who have a monopoly on it. Again, I haven't seen this in years, so I got to read it here. Yeah, the new vocoders are definitely better. There's also something called Codec 2, or I think it's M17 is the VHF voice version. I'd love to see that. It was just emerging when I did this presentation umpteen years ago. M17 seems to be gaining traction. I don't know too much about Codec 2 on the HF bands yet. I'd look forward to that. In fact, this is my way station to stop over on the way to Dayton, and Flex is supposed to be announcing something. I've had some bets that Codec 2 is going to be in the next model of Flex.
I know there's something called 3DB that may be Codec 2, but that's gaining traction on the HF bands. It's an open source variant for digital modes and for voice modes.
I'd love to see it. Yeah.
There's a couple of frequencies that they have reserved-ish, not technically, but people are trying to say, hey, we can use these ones for that. But it's the same idea, you can talk and it'll do digital to
Right.
for HF, or you can have fading and stuff like that, because that's real handy.
Have they gained any traction on users actually doing it?
They were starting to gain numbers, I think.
Okay.
A lot of it is just because it's still really new, so they're trying to work.
Oh, it's bleeding edge.
Trying to get it rolled out to people, get people trying it out.
Right.
But you can download the software for your computer and hook it up to your radio. If you already do digital mode, you just download and tell it where to point.
Good.
Go
well, I'll be in Dayton tomorrow, so we'll find out if the rumors are true. Okay. Yeah, and these are the codecs that are used. P25 phase 1 was IMBD, improved multiband excitation or something, I forget what it was. And then this is advanced, the same letters, that's D star. And then everything else is AMBE plus 2. Kind of repetition. Yay, you're done.
Yeah, Codec 2.
Codec 2? Okay.
For the pre-DV.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
I knew next to nothing about digital modes before this. Now I know a whole lot. Thank you very much.
Oh.
Very comprehensive.
I did it for the same reason. In 2016, I knew DMR, but I didn't think about the other stuff. So this forced me to learn.
Yeah, I had some questions in mind, most of which were not answered. One was partially answered, I think. But it struck me as curious in the ham radio world that there's such a fusion of modes that there's not more agreement on a particular mode, and also that most of the modes are proprietary rather than open source. It just seems to go against the grain of most of what ham radio has done for over 100 years.
Which is why the people are working on Codec 2. To make the nice thing about standards is there are so many of them. Back when the first digital modes came out, DVSI was the only company in town that made the vocoders, so there was no choice. So Yaesu Fusion is on a tear. DMR is doing really well. D-Star it's not doing well. It's really faded out.
Something we've done around here with Fusion, the idea is to get more activity in Fusion.
Yeah.
Well, that worked for a while, but it's kind of faded down, but, what they've done is there's a fellow up in Campbell, New York, that he's got a room. And we've got repeaters in the
Oh, yeah.
area, Syrup area, Owego here, and right out here on the
Mhm.
pole. And, another one down in, Conklin.
Wow.
And they all are linked into that room.
Now, does that bring up the activity?
It does, and a lot of it, there's a bunch that got into it. And full of it, like Christmas Day, you get the new present.
Right,
You play with them, and then in the afternoon, you're playing with the box that came in.
right.
Well, that was some of what a lot of it was, so now it's down to just a few users, they have 2 nets a week on. And, but the one beauty is that you can start from here and you can communicate clear to almost to Bath, New York, along Route 86.
Nice.
Through Fusion, and they're all tied in, and each computer is by their own owners. And by agreement, we can, the owners can do as they want, and most of us have opted to keep the repeaters linked to that room.
Good.
So,
Yeah.
and now, some hams, they'd rather be able to surf, or they could go to America Link or something like that, but in the room, it all sits there, and it works out well, but once again, very little activity. And there's
That's
been,
part of
around here, there's been some people that want DMR, but you kind of summarized just what I figured with DMR. There's a lot more involved to it,
It is.
and not many around here that have got the time and effort to put into it.
Well, if you find a club or some Elmers to get you into DMR to get over that hump to get your first code plug, it's pretty good. So what we're going to do in the Lakes region, I mean, I put up a UHF DMR repeater on Gunstock, and it's really not used all that much. The problem is getting the radios programmed. So what we decided to do is limit ourselves to one model of mobile and one model of portable. And if someone wants to get on, I'll help program it, because you're going to clone my code plug. We change your DMR ID, and boom, you're on the air. If you support 24 radios, you get 24 code plug theories, and it's not going to work.
So on 2 notes, the thing is with DMR, like Raspberry Pi hotspots have become a lot cheaper over the years.
Yeah, I have,
You
yeah.
can use old ones that cost $10 online. So a lot of people without a repeater just go do that. And so everybody being like, hey, this is actually really common, we should get a repeater. They just have the technology at their house, so there's no need for a repeater.
Right.
That's what we have here.
Okay. And a lot of people are doing that.
And on the code plug thing, I know Frank, he's the one that had the DMR stuff out here. He actually has, it's the 7.3 forums or something, and they have a whole bunch of code plugs for the area based on different radios. You can just go in and look at this radio, that model, download. To try to help people get into
you need it. It's having everybody start from scratch is almost impossible.
And like Josh was saying, Frank's been a big help. We have the net on Sunday night. And
That's
it's
Fusion?
on DMR, it's connected to wires exit. Also, and we're also on Zoom for people that aren't on, but they can come to us and we can help get them started.
Oh, that's cool.
Because you're right, it is a hill to get over.
Yeah.
Frank's quite knowledgeable in all this stuff, and I say he's a whiz at it, and he helps people get their radios going.
Right. Well, to me, DMR was a shiny new digital toy, so I jumped into that. And then, my interest kind of went down a little bit, and what's this Fusion thing? So now I became a Fusion fan. Well, now you guys might do the opposite. You're Fusion, and hey, let's try DMR. You never know. Ham radio.
And not this club, but an online club called Ham Radio Crash Course. It's got people started, and they have a system where you can DMR or Yaesu or all of them, and it'll
Jason was it KI6
NAZ.
Yeah, I watch him every week. Yeah, great podcasts. Ham Radio Tube is a good one. Ham Radio 2.0, both those guys are out of Texas. If you're into POTA, KB9VBR has a really good set of podcasts that's really focused on antennas and POTA, among other things, but he's kind of a POTA. In fact, if you look at the new POTA book that ARRL came out with, he's actually on the cover.
No.
So.
Yeah, Ham Radio 2.0 was live streaming from Dayton this afternoon.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was sitting with 3 or 4 friends in a tent smoking cigars.
Right. He has an RV that he takes there, and yeah, they publicize they're going to be on 145.45, so just call them the frequency and see if they're there. So real social group. I'm sorry?
There's a reason why he's called the Smoking Ape.
That's a different guy. Yeah.
Oh.
He's part of the same crew though.
Gotcha.
And all these guys that I mentioned are hang out together at conventions. So they're not competitors, they're buddies.
Yeah.
So. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there much activity in New Hampshire with like packet radio, like not APRS so much, like, you know?
Not anymore. No, there is APRS. Central New Hampshire Amateur Radio Club has a couple APRS fixed stations, but as far as packet, not really. So, yeah, being from Endwell, somebody mentioned that you might have was it Fusion in Owego?
Mhm.
Okay. That made me think when I went to ME schools, said, oh, Owego, that's an Indian name, right? Yeah, it is. Yeah, the Indians took one look at the place and they went, oh, we go.
Oh, we go.
We go. So, anyway,
Well,
thanks.
hey, Rick, thank you so much. Great presentation and great to reconnect with you and always invited to come back, next time you're through the area or join us any third Wednesday of the,
Hey, do that.
yeah,
On
it's,
Zoom, yeah.
it's